Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
Yep. And we're continuing our review of 2017. Not nationally, because that's depressing, but
Right.
locally.
Yeah, sometimes I think you're supposed to wait till like December 31st to review the year.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing
Yeah,
this,
but we're doing it. So anyway, there are quite a few things, highs and lows, that have happened during the year 2017, at least locally. Citywise. Just from the sort of municipal government's point of view. I mean, there's a lot of other interesting, really good things or bad things as well. One of the things that I think was very significant was that there was the second of the Barrett petitions, which was a zoning petition called the Central Square Restoration Petition. I mean, I call it a Barrett because he was the principal author, but there were other hands involved in drafting the language of that zoning plan. And it ended up passing unanimously.
Because it was well done, but
it didn't overshoot.
It got a lot of public meetings.
Yep. It very deliberately chose not to include provisions for very high heights because there would be some people who would rebel against it.
Right.
But it did make it a little more economically viable for an existing property owner who has just basically been sitting on a property for years and years and years to do some redevelopment of it. Right. I think Patrick himself is actually taking at least a little bit of an advantage of some of those provisions.
Well, he does own the whole corner there with the hotel and all.
Yeah, so in the building where Tuscanini's is, so he's getting a little extra advantage from that.
Right.
He actually got the okay on his project for there before those provisions went in.
That's true.
So he just got like a little tweak as a result of it. But the big Normandy Twining, which I guess is now just the map called the Mass and Main project, that's proceeding, but that was based on its own zoning, not in any way benefiting from it.
It had separate hearings and separate public,
I think there has been a kind of a hope that at least a few select sites in Central Square which are underbuilt and could stand a little bit better building. Like, for example, properties that Morris Nagar and family own up near Norfolk Street and Mass Ave.
They wanted it included in this petition, didn't they?
No, that was a different one.
Oh, was it?
But so far, no movement on that.
All right.
They are doing the project on Essex Street. Apparently, it's starting to proceed again. I think the site where the Middle East restaurant is, there was at least some proposal to build more height onto that because it's only like a one-story building, right? And I believe there's some movement toward another proposal. It's being floated now further up Mass Ave toward the core of Central Square. And I think these are good things. I mean, this is not like you're building a giganto building on the fringe of the city, far from public transit. Insofar as almost everybody seems to think that a little higher density and near public transit is a pretty good thing. Some people might argue, well, maybe you should put in more, but certainly nobody's going to object to putting some. So anyway, it looks to me like as we bend the corner into 2018, you may start to see at least a little movement on that, and so that was a good outcome for this. I think the city council. There was actually, but let me do some of the better ones here first, and we'll sort of maybe go back and forth. We finally have the $1 million allocation to get the curbside organics collection started. Right, so that was part of this budget cycle, and that will go into effect in
April 1st. April 1st, I heard, is when they start collecting, which means that they'll start distributing them when the snow's out, I guess. I don't know.
We'll see, but it's movement. I mean, it's not so, the city council may have sort of pushed for that a few years ago, but I think that was prior to this current council term.
I don't think the city council was the initiators of this.
I don't think they were the initiators. There were city council orders that pushed it, but that's largely because it was already getting pushed.
It was already getting pushed.
So the manager came forth, and pretty much the council just approved it.
And I think the biggest change is that it's going to be an in-house collection, which I would like to find out more about.
I think there's for as long as I can remember, there's always been at least a wish that we could do more recycling collection in-house.
Besides the trash, right.
Rather than do it through the contractors. It's sort of a goodwill gesture to the laborers and the union. So that's a good thing. I'm looking forward to that. On the zoning, another one on the zoning end of things, it's relatively recent, but the Well, it is and it isn't. So the
Right.
the
For a long
Volpe
time,
site,
yeah.
we talked about the Volpe
Yeah.
site
I think that was in the
on
last.
this program
Yeah.
like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
whatever. There was a proposal to do something there, and then it kind of fell apart. I remember there was actually a sense that, well, we've got to do something and got to get the zoning in place before the Obama
this is-
administration ends.
But wasn't this before they put it out to bid even?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
So,
MIT ended up being, okay.
right,
Yeah.
but I mean,
So
everything.
we've had the access
Yeah.
to the site for a long time.
Yes
or
and no.
sort of
I mean,
access, yeah.
the discussion began when
Long time
the
ago, yeah.
General Services Administration, at least, said they were willing to talk about the possibility of
Handing
utilizing
over
this
that, yeah.
this federal provision where if you build us our new building, you will let you do the development of
rest
the
of it,
rest of the
okay.
property. But it didn't really seem to get anywhere, and I think there was some of the sort of the pie in the sky proposals from Councilor Chung for the 1,000-foot tower, which that was actually before the last
Wow.
election,
Yeah.
municipal election.
Now they don't
Right.
even like a 500-foot tower, a lot of
Right.
people.
But I think it was I think
1,000
at the
feet,
yeah,
that's a
It was
lot.
never going to happen.
No.
But I think it was at the end of the previous year, the end of 2016, when MIT was granted the right to be the developer. And as soon as I heard that, I said, well, that's actually the best possible
Right,
outcome.
because they're not going anywhere.
They're not going
Right.
anywhere. So you can work. It's a partner you can actually work with.
Who has some history with the city.
We've got a lot of history with the city and a pretty good history with the
Yeah.
city. So anyway, at some point during the year, I think it was in late spring, MIT came forward with the MIT Volpe
Their first
petition,
proposed, yeah.
and then they massaged it, amended it, and finally
Had lots of meetings, I think, with the public.
a tremendous
Yeah.
number of meetings, and came out with what I think will be a good outcome ultimately. So the zoning was approved. So nothing's done because a lot of stuff has to happen still, and as each building comes in, you still have to apply and you have to get your special permits and do all of that. But the zoning's settled.
So going back to that though, tell me, what was the end result of the graduate? I mean, I know that they promised
It
to do
became moot.
something.
Actually, there's an interesting thing. I get
There's
this.
still some petition out there? Or
There
that gone?
is, and it's not going anywhere.
Okay.
And this is a little bit of sort of inside baseball at MIT. There is a graduate student association, and they were not the chief proponents of that proposal. That was a proposal that was largely crafted by other hands with somewhat political motivation. And
But it was graduate students.
it
of
was not
MIT.
all graduate students.
No, but some.
there were some political players in there as well, and they were trying to use the Volpe process to leverage graduate student housing, which I think is, I don't know anybody disagrees with that as a good thing, right? But loading it in and making it a condition on the ability to do anything at Volpe was, I think, legally questionable and financially kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And also, they overshot by 1,000,000 miles for what the actual need and timetable should be. So MIT actually said, well, look, let's actually deal with the Graduate Student Association and come up with better analysis and come up with a better plan, and they did.
Yeah.
So before the zoning passed, they actually came by with a timetable and a proposal to build a very significant amount of graduate housing. But they're doing it on their own terms, really the way it should have been done in the first place. So meanwhile, this other so-called Smith petition is just sort of sitting out there. It has an expiration date early in 2018.
And did that petition want it to be at the Volpe Center? Wasn't that one
No,
of the
it didn't.
issues?
And that in itself makes it a little bit ridiculous, because what it basically says is that we want to pass a zoning petition that is applicable to only one possible property owner, because no other developer would have been required to build graduate student housing for MIT.
I see.
And so that's why if it ever went to court, there's just no way that would have survived.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
So-
Because the zoning should not be connected to one.
It really can't be.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So anyway, I think everybody acknowledged that the people who were pushing it may, if they wish to, they can claim some success because of helping to pressure something.
Yeah.
But the specifics of the zoning really was something that was never to be. And now I think they've had all the necessary hearings and it's been placed on file. So it just sits there, tick, tick, tick. The zone,
But
and then
maybe
it
it
expires.
accomplished something. like you said, because when you do have
Yeah,
a push from
but,
one direction, it does.
But having spoken
Yeah.
with some of the people at MIT who are
Yeah.
involved in this was their intention from the start to
Mm.
actually do this and to, address the graduate student housing issue, and they did. So to what degree was this particular group influential? They were
Well,
somewhat.
maybe because it happened sooner. Maybe that's.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it helped leverage things a little
Right.
bit. So, but I'd have to say it goes down as one of the more significant outcomes of the year. Even though
Yeah.
there's nothing, you go by Volpe site,
Still the
you don't
same.
see nothing,
Yeah.
but you
Well,
will.
It's a 15, 20-year
Oh,
thing.
the event, yeah.
I mean, they first have to build the
take a while.
building for the federal government.
Yeah,
That's the first thing they have to do.
that's exactly right.
Right, so,
Yeah. So it's
anyway.
going to be a good long while before
Yeah.
you really see things tangibly happening there.
Okay.
Just one small thing, but I always
the
actually
annex.
let me mention two quick things
All
about it.
right.
One thing which is maybe it's an outcome of one of the aspects of this year that can't really have a good resolution, which was this problem where the Cambridge License Commission began issuing these so-called
that,
no
yeah.
value licenses for liquor licenses,
Yeah, that really.
and it
is
put into
unfortunate.
this really weird limbo people who had already spent a lot of money on liquor
$200,000,
licenses.
counting on it for their retirement.
For retirement. Now, as I like to point out to people, but during the lifetime of the use of that license, they were able to make a considerable amount of money at their places of business.
I hadn't heard that.
And without that license, they would never have been able to do that. So it's not
True.
like the
before
thing
they
was
were-
valueless.
Right, true.
The issue is it something that can remain as a commodity that can be sold on
Right.
the market?
Yes.
And apparently the answer is no. In fact,
Yeah.
the license, I believe the license that was associated with TT the Bears at a license commission hearing about a week or so ago, basically they said, all right, it's done. It's now, it doesn't exist anymore. So I think there was some holding out for some hope that somehow the city was going to compensate
I mean, that
the
place
holders.
is, that entity is gone and Sonia's there, right? I mean,
Right,
So,
Yeah, but the notion that the city was somehow going to
Yeah.
cough up money to compensate somebody for
Yeah.
something that they bought on the open market at a
right,
price
but it wasn't it
determined
more
by
the
market.
methods that were used was arbitrary, how somebody got a free license or someone, I mean, wasn't that
You know,
more
I
the
think
issue?
The way I look at it is
Yeah.
that there's this sort of gray area, this
So only the
in
last few
between
years,
world
yeah.
where you are moving
Things
from
got
one way of
changed.
doing regulation
Right.
to another way of doing
Well,
regulation.
look at taxi cabs, has
Yeah.
that been resolved at all?
No, not really. But the
Yeah.
cost of a taxi cab medallion has plummeted.
But do you have to have one to operate or call yourself a
A
taxi?
taxi, yeah, but the thing is,
But
the
not
Ubers and
Ubers.
Lyfts are really the ones
They're
that are now
exempt.
taking it over,
Yeah.
but they are quote not taxis, even though
So
they're
that,
taxis.
so it's the same thing, it's
Yeah.
like the value of
very
those has gone
comparable.
down.
Yes, so that's
Those are a lot more money.
yeah. So that's definitely was a significant
Yeah.
event of this year, I
Yeah.
think, and
Yeah,
and I imagine people will still be making the case that somehow they should get compensation, but in
Yeah.
fact, I just don't see any way in which the city can in any way be
and
responsible
it's,
for
it's
that.
not just the city, right? Isn't it, I think
It
the
is, the
article,
city is
is it
what
just
regulates it.
Cambridge? No, but I think it's happening in other cities. It wasn't
Um,
just Cambridge?
certainly the Uber Lyft matter, but
No, I guess I'm talking about back to the liquor license.
no, I think Cambridge is actually regulated in a somewhat different way.
Oh,
And what really made this problem a bad problem in Cambridge was the fact that Cambridge had established maybe 25 or something years ago. I think I was around when it was happening. They were established these cap areas. So in Central Square, Harvard Square, and others.
Oh, a certain
And they
amount.
said is a certain
Amount
fixed amount of
establishments, right.
licenses
Ah,
available,
then they became
and
very
then that became a commodity.
competitive.
Yeah, so then you had to wait till one was
Right.
available, or try and buy one from somebody.
But isn't that all state regulated? Some of it, because the thing about Trader Joe's not selling alcohol anymore and beer at the Cambridge
Well, that was
port,
because there was a
Well, there's
limit on how many you could
that
have
statewide,
per state.
Right.
Statewide.
but they think
yeah.
that's going to change.
Well, I think
next
it's actually
year.
was rolled
going up
into
to
the
9.
into the ballot question a few years ago that they will be
yeah.
able to have more per state. I think it was originally a maximum of
Right.
3, and then it's going up a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah. So those are things that are regulated by the state, but
right. Okay.
just on the specifics of the so-called no value liquor licenses. Again, a little bit unresolved. It's actually something the city council had no role in. I think they tried to pressure a bit,
Right.
but it's just not
Well, right.
under their control.
Yeah.
one very little thing was but it has to be mentioned. There was this kerfuffle in Harvard Square over this place called And Pizza.
Yeah,
So they were going to open up in the old Nini's Corner spot,
right.
and then they got a 3-2 vote approving it, but that's not enough to get the approval at the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So that's not the planning board, that's the Board of
Board of Zoning
Zoning?
Appeals, yeah. So because there's a fast food cap. Now that too has to change.
Right,
I hope the new council will see fit to rewrite some of the rules generally so
isn't that all part of this retail strategy thing?
It
that
really
you're
should be.
Rewriting the formula.
Yeah, I
versus
think they're
that?
going to have to think that through carefully. But so they went through a rather extraordinary process to get a redo, a do-over, right? And then when it went to the Board of Zoning Appeal the second time, it passed unanimously. But not until it was propaganda campaigns all up and down, basically trying to make out the Pizza Group as this terrible thing. And there was an argument saying there's already too many pizza places in Harvard Square.
You know,
as in Just Crust Pizza just closed this past week.
but you know what's interesting?
weeks ago.
I go to Coolidge Corner a lot, and there is Oath Pizza just opened, which is very pricey.
Yeah.
And 2 doors away is the one that you said closed here, Urban.
Just Pizza?
No,
Just Crust?
upper crust.
Okay.
And then across the street is Otto's.
Right.
You can throw a stone at each of them, and that's Brookline. So I don't know what that's about.
You can never
3?
have too much pizza. So, but anyway, it was interesting because it became intertwined with the
Yeah.
various neighborhood groups, and
Yeah.
you know, it was sort of part of the whole politics.
It's also
of
the
the city.
look of it, the awning, which I
Yeah.
kind of agree, pink and white awning.
Yeah, I know, but that's the
candy
thing you
stripers.
adjudicate.
Right, you
That's
could,
not
you could
the
deal
should.
with that.
That's
But
not
what
the
they're
old
didn't
get
they?
it or don't
Wait,
get
didn't
it
they get
question.
it with the milk thing?
They had to basically, in order to do
They now have
the.
another
yeah.
entity in there.
I mean, that was sort of part of the strategy to get the
Yeah.
do-over. You had to say, well, this is a somewhat
We're
different
also
proposal.
serving, yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, it was notable
Yeah.
because of all of the
yeah.
strong feelings that were generated on either side of that
Oh.
issue.
So
Anyway, I
much
was pretty
going on
glad
in
it got
Harvard
passed
Square.
there.
My goodness.
Yeah. Actually, one of the really great new developments in Central Square was establishment of the Central Fleet. You know, which is this parking lot at Prospect and Bishop Allen that's been empty forever. Well, I mean, it's a
Well,
parking
it's not
lot,
empty, it's a parking lot.
but there's no
Robert.
activity to be seen.
Well, because it's a parking lot, Robert.
Right.
Most of
Right,
the
right,
time.
but on the weekends it's just an
Yes.
empty space.
Yeah, I don't know why, yeah.
And you know, Michael Monestein and the Central Square Business Association managed to swing it to have it turned into this incredibly exciting, fun event. Last
Does he have
Sunday,
any
early morning.
stats on that, whether people, the
I don't-
vendors?
I don't. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, maybe, he's gonna maybe be a guest
Well,
next
maybe
week.
it'll happen next
Yeah,
week here.
maybe.
But I have to say that was one of the really, really great
like that,
developments
yeah.
in this year,
Mhm.
all around. Certainly, I think we mentioned the regulation of the short-term rentals in the last half hour. That was a huge thing that culminated in a successful vote. I think it was a unanimous vote, actually, in the late spring or early summer, I think it was. It might have been later, I'm not sure now. Right? There were a few other things that were maybe not so successful. One of the things, there was a big push to have publicly funded municipal elections. And I think, you know, there are some interesting ideas and maybe some merit in it. But the way it was presented publicly and before the city council,
It's too political.
it was very politicized and turned into a statement about, you know, getting the
Really
money out of
developer
this.
money,
And
yeah.
it was more than a few suggestions that certain elected officials or councilors were somehow the bad guys with,
Yeah,
they were unclean because they took money from certain individuals
Right.
or whatever. And that's pretty much what killed it, I think.
yeah,
You know, so basically, if you can come up with a value neutral way of promoting an idea, try that next time, folks. I think you might get a little more traction that
I
way.
mean, I don't think the issue's gone away, cause I think they're still looking at it somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the new
Yeah, I don't-
counselors, cause Seattle has some voucher
Yeah.
system, it sounds complicated.
There are some
but-
interesting ideas
Yeah.
out there, but one of the things that I've tried to point out repeatedly is that it's not exactly comparable to when you have municipal elections where there are slates of
26
candidates.
And
and-
26 candidates, how
Yeah.
do you differentiate,
Yeah, and
you know,
you know,
who
and
gets money?
exactly, and you know, and would there be a perverse incentive for you to like drum up a bunch of candidates just so
Right.
you could all be
Pool
eligible
that
for
money.
funding?
Yeah, I
funding
don't
to
like
promote
it
a slate?
myself, but,
So there's a lot of unanswered questions, but you know, no question, it was an issue. I think it was at the summer meeting, they were gonna try and push it through, and then it was a charter right exercise, which pretty
I
much
mean,
killed
you
it.
said this, and I agree that there should be a voluntary cap on money spent.
Right, and that's,
And then people, and you could keep pointing that, you know, when you're trying to say, I'm better than this candidate, look, I'm honoring this,
right,
and this person isn't, or whatever, but
yeah.
that's gonna be hard
Now,
to do.
Now I have to say, there was no such pledge this year, but there were some candidates, and the money,
Really?
the figures are still coming in.
The pledge it,
You
people
know,
who pledge not to spend more than?
no, nobody that I know made such a pledge.
No,
But,
there's enormous amounts of
But what
money
happened
spent.
was there were
Yeah.
some candidates, I won't name them right
Yeah.
now, but
You can
who
look it
actually
up, it's
spent,
right there.
you know, at least in one case, in excess of $100,000 on a city council
That's
campaign.
crazy.
And as I say, the bills are still being paid, and
Yeah.
so something is a little out of control
Yeah.
on that. But to
Too
me,
much.
it's not so much the source of the money that's the big issue,
Right.
because some of those candidates were getting that money from, not from
Right.
developers, but just getting the
Rich
money.
people.
And then if you were a sort of a big high rolling character who could generate
Yeah.
a lot of funds, but I have to say though that there's, just because you make you spend a lot of money in a campaign did not guarantee
At least
success.
in one case it didn't, but
Right,
others
and-
it probably did a
And
little
one
bit.
of the most successful new candidates was Sumbul Siddiqui, who, there's a little bit more money from the, it was like $7 a vote or something. But, she's still down at the bottom in terms of dollars per
Okay,
vote
really?
generated, so,
That's good.
so if a candidate
She
could
did
actually.
a lot of shoe leather retail stuff. I know that. She
Yes.
went all over the city.
So it's really
Yeah.
clear now
Yeah.
that you can run a very, very successful city council campaign
Do it
for
wisely.
maybe
Yeah.
$30-something thousand.
Yeah. Which still.
I wish it was cheaper, but hey, if
Yeah.
that's what it takes, that's what
Yeah.
it takes.
Yeah.
And
Because you have to hire somebody to help you out.
right.
It can't be.
Well, you don't necessarily have
you don't
to.
have to, but it helps
It helps.
because it's.
Yeah. But I think it's starting to become clear that spending $90,000 on a
Doesn't
campaign,
necessarily mean
it
you're
doesn't
gonna get
guarantee
it.
success. So maybe if there was some notion of a voluntary cap, it might be something you can actually make
Yeah.
the case.
Well, I
But
hope
that's
people are
a-
listening to that. 'Cause
That's a
it's-
topic for
it's-
next year, I
yeah,
suppose. As we sort of, because any changes that might want to happen would have to happen well in advance
Exactly.
of the next municipal election. So you can't wait till 2019 to do it. You'd have to do something a bit earlier.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was one zoning petition that I think it'll come back in a better way. There was some unhappiness about vacant buildings. I shouldn't call them abandoned buildings. Somebody corrected me the other day, but properties left vacant because a big property owner was pretty much just holding them as an investment, but not actually moving on them. Probably the most significant one was some of the Gerald
Right.
Chan properties in Harvard Square,
Oh, right. Yeah.
like the cinema. Now apparently that's getting resolved.
Well, he was
ultimately.
pushed to kind of appear, and all of a sudden there was
I'm
a
still
plan.
not convinced that it was the push,
I think
but
it was.
I think it helped.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think a few years from now we may look back and say, well, Gerald Chan did some good things.
Gerald Chan's done a lot of good things. He
Yes.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
go to MIT and there's like this
Yeah.
hospital. I mean, he's.
They'll be good. I
he
think
lives
this.
in Newton. It's not
Yeah.
like he's just.
So I think this will work out ultimately. But the thing is, there are still properties that are still vacant, and if you're running a restaurant, for example, with the cinema, if you're running a restaurant on Church Street, and
Yeah.
you were always dependent on the movie crowd,
Yeah,
and
there
then the
you
movie
go.
theater goes
Right.
away and stays away, then
Mhm.
ultimately it's not just the movie theater, it's you too. So there is some incentive and some good reasons to actually dissuade people from leaving properties vacant for too long.
Right.
But the city council came in with a proposal that was nuts. And they basically said, we're gonna enact a fee
Oh, right.
that would basically
yeah.
charge you half the value of your taxable
What
value
is
of your
that?
property
I'm sorry.
per year. And, I mean, you have to work it out, but the math pretty much said in 2 years, you will have coughed up the entire value of your property to the city. And it was so obvious that was a regulatory taking. But my understanding from one of the city councilors is that the idea of doing something about regulating and registering these properties is still very much on the table, but they will be soon coming back with a proposal that's much more rational.
So how does
and-
that relate to the Bishop Allen Drive property.
Well, Vale Court was taken by the city outright, and that's still a little unresolved because
They
well-
haven't stopped, that's still,
it's still
Cease.
waiting. Yeah,
well,
Well,
forget it now, winter.
there's
they're
an
not gonna do
injunction,
anything.
and
Oh,
I mean, supposedly for one reason having to do with the previous owner wanting to recover property from there.
after 10 years.
Yeah, after 10 years, which seems a little
Yeah.
nonsensical. But I think there's still some adjudication to come in terms of the
Well,
value.
it's too bad, because it's gonna go through another winter.
Yeah,
We're not gonna
yeah.
start construction now.
That's right. That's right. Actually, one other sort of bad actor thing that happened
We have
this
a minute and a
this
half
year.
left, how bad?
Right. So we no. I'll say quick. It was
Yeah.
So they did pass the short-term rental, but
Right,
while they were doing that, the
Yeah.
industry came in under the sort of this thing called the Cockrell petition,
oh,
where they were
right,
actually going
yeah.
to try and have their own regulation of
Yeah.
short-term rentals that wasn't really going to regulate it much at all. And the person after whom was named, the first signer,
Didn't even know,
Cockrell, actually didn't even know this,
and then wanted to
and
withdraw.
would say,
from
"I'll
it,
take my name off of that. I wouldn't have supported such a thing."
Such a sham.
So that was kind of like some
Yeah.
kind of dirty pool.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah,
that was one of the things that happened during the year. And I think as we headed into the municipal election season, one of the
Mm.
biggest ones I think is inescapable was the sort of the kerfuffle over the bike lanes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't know how that's actually going to end up being settled, but there are two things, and I'll say this in the last
Yeah.
40 seconds here. There's this curious dichotomy. There's this group called Cambridge Bike Safety, and now there's a group called Safe Streets for All.
Mm,
You know, huge generational divide between
Yeah.
them, I might
Yeah.
add here,
yeah.
where they were all sort of they're both trying to take a stand on who's got the right viewpoint.
Mm.
And in the election season, it was the Residents Alliance versus A Better Cambridge
Mhm.
claiming to be the two sides of the political coin,
Mhm.
which honestly is ridiculous.
Mhm.
That we can do a lot better than just having those two groups basically be defining
Well,
the politics.
hopefully
of the
this
city.
new council will work together.
I hope they will work
Because
together.
there's
I
some
think
really
that was
good people.
there's
that
a
are
lot of
in that.
potential there.
A
So
lot of potential.
anyway, see you next week.